Good evening and welcome to the January 23rd, 2019 Moscow Planning and Zoning meeting. Welcome also to Councilwoman Gina Terusio, who's the City Council liaison tonight. So first item is approval of the minutes from the January 9th item. There were some corrections, but not material. So any other additional comments, corrections, additions, deletions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
So Dennis, motion, and Victoria second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay. Correspondence, Mike?
Nothing from staff this evening.
Great, okay. Transportation Commission meeting. Joel is not able to be with us tonight. We wish him speedy recovery. So, and Mike, is there any other items that you were aware of from the Transportation Commission
Not
meeting?
that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we'll skip on past that one. Next item is the public comment period. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that at the January 9th meeting, some legitimate and very serious concerns were raised about some of the impacts that the Identity Moscow had on peripheral to other apartment buildings and tenants. And so the commission was concerned, felt that they were concerns that needed to be further looked into. We asked Mike to do some follow-up. And Mike, if you wouldn't mind reporting out what contacts you've had and what you found.
Yeah, just since the last meeting, I reached out to the contractor as well as the property manager, and I think they had talked to Chuck in the past about some of those concerns, and were acknowledged that they were aware of those, and kind of expressed some of Chuck's ideas as far as putting up a potential fence. They said they were going to reach out to Mr. Bond and maybe talk through some of those issues to see if they could get that, issue corralled over there as far as the off-site parking. And then we went back through the parking mitigation plan that they were required to submit for the PUD, and there was a portion of that addressed potential covenants and lease agreements if there should be a problem that arises with parking. And so we've reached out to the manager, and we're going to request copies of those leases and have them incorporate acknowledgments that there's limited parking on site to hopefully diminish some of the future tenants' knowledge. Hopefully they'll increase their knowledge going into the project that the parking's limited. And I think that was the main issue, was just the communication between the leasing agents and potential or prospective tenants of the project, and so we'll continue to follow through on that, but just wanted to report.
Okay, super, thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners to Mike on the issue? I have a feeling this will be a continuing discussion probably over the next period of time. So
yeah, I think it's at least it had certainly been a favored project by me, so I've been going by on a fairly regular basis just to try and get a better sense of the dilemma that we might face, and so I think it's good for any of us to watch the project a little more closely than we might have otherwise done, just to learn from our decision and how the project's going.
great, thanks very much, Mike, appreciate it. Let me just kind of retreat very slightly. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Rob Parrish, and I'm the Vice Chair of Planning and Zoning, and I am sitting in tonight for our Chair, Wendy McClure, who is over there out of the phone. So just wanted to recognize that. Okay, public comment, and if anybody has anything they would like to address to the commission that is not on tonight's agenda or before either Planning and Zoning or the Board of Adjustment, we would like to hear from you.
Chuck Bond, 626 North Moore Street, here in Moscow. Again, thank you for indulging me. I'll interrupt myself. Nobody has reached out to me in any respects concerning the parking issue or fences or anything from Identity.
Okay.
And as far as the comment that I believe you made, making sure that Identity expresses to their tenants that parking is limited, I think they're all fully aware of that. You can buy a permit to be in their lot until they're gone. And that isn't going to stop somebody, probably not stop them from renting, and isn't going to stop them from bringing a car, I doubt. As I said 2 weeks ago, this is North Idaho, you got to have a car to get here. But again, nobody has spoken to me from Identity about the fence or the parking or anything at all. When I was here 2 weeks ago, I guess I put it to you folks, and you said that you were going to talk amongst yourselves in between the meetings and whatnot. And is what I heard tonight, is that the board's plan to, I guess, help alleviate my problem? Is it still kind of on hold? Is there anything definite that you guys are thinking to solve my problem?
I think that the initial part was to reach out to Identity and see if there was a way to resolve this with those discussions, and we'll continue to follow up. I don't know that the commission had intended to, I don't think we have the ability to go back and revisit the parking specifically, and I may be wrong about that, but it was approved that way.
No,
And
the Identity's parking?
Right.
Oh, I'm sure you can't do anything about
Right,
that,
right.
absolutely.
But we do want to continue to work on the issues that they committed to, like the electric cars that seem to have not arrived, making sure that, for example, one of the things that came out was they are advertising parking as a part of their marketing for leasing their apartments, and we think that they need to disclose that is limited parking, and parking may not be available. So we're going to continue to work on this. I think that one of the things that we appreciated about your presentation and comments the last meeting was that we needed to come back and look at this so we could see the impact of some of the decisions that we were making. I mean, I think we all acknowledged that we were pretty excited about the project. This was an issue that we acknowledged was going to be a challenge, but we thought it could be worked through, and I'm still optimistic that we can find solutions, but we're going to continue to work with city staff to see if we can stay in touch with them and encourage them to do what they committed to do. And from an enforcement standpoint, I'm not sure where we would go with that. And I'm not saying we wouldn't. I'm just saying that I don't know that I have specific knowledge right now about what enforcement actions could be taken if they don't comply with the permits and the approvals that we did. So we certainly would be following up on that.
And I can appreciate that.
Rob, this is Wendy. I'm just wondering also, Mike and I had a bit of a discussion about this. There was also going to be some discussion about the fence, correct? Or do you know, Mike, where that is going with the owner of Identity?
Yeah, I reached out to him the day after the meeting, a couple Wednesdays ago, and they said that, it sounded like they had talked to Chuck about that in the past, but this is my first I've heard that they haven't reached out to him. So I'll follow up tomorrow, and then I'll make sure I follow up with Chuck to make sure that they actually do what they say they're going to do as far as reach out to him. So.
Right.
And as you were talking about doing follow-up and making sure that the things like the zip cars, what were required in the development agreement are followed through, that's great, but that does not solve my problem at all, in any way, shape, or form. That does nothing for me. And I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, you can tell them to tell their potential tenants, don't park here, or we've got limited parking. There's a young lady, and she has 2 M license plates, and it is a silver Nissan Stanza, if I recall. And I put a little tag on windshield wipers because I don't like to have anybody towed. And I put one. And the next day, I caught her there, and she said, well, I just parked here last night. And I said, no, you were here the night before because I tagged you. The next day, 3 days later after the first tag, 2 days later after the first tag, her car was there again. I put another flyer under the windshield wiper. So the fourth time when I came in, I wrote on, I said, I will not warn you again. So Identity can talk to their tenants or potential tenants all they want. It's not going to do any good as far as I am concerned. And I have had more vehicles towed from my lot this week. And if you look at the property, what was it? Yeah, where Southside Mini Mart was. You go by there, you'll see cars stacked up like cordwood. Now, I can't guarantee it, but I'll bet you 99 times out of 100, those cars are from Identity. Those cars will end up going somewhere else. Gritman now has a sign up in their lot there on what would be kind of the southwest side of Jackson before it ties into 95. This is Gritman parking only. There's a reason that sign's up there. And all those cars that are in what I call Martson's old lot, they'll be in my lot as soon as that is shut down to their use. So a fence won't stop all of it, but it will certainly hinder, I think, a tremendous portion of it, and that is what needs to be done.
Okay. Well, we'll continue to work with you on that,
Okay.
follow up, and what you talked to us about at the last meeting was very instructive for us. And obviously, we can't undo things that we
course
did
not.
a couple years ago, but it certainly helps us understand more directly the impact. So we appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Okay, thank you very
Great.
much for your time.
Thanks, Chuck. Victoria?
Mike, have you talked at any time to the university? Because I know they have problems with people parking where they shouldn't. For example, I went to the rec center, I saw a couple guys pull in and then go on to campus, and I hear that happens a lot at the rec center, which is the only place I'm going these days. But they probably have similar problems, just in terms of misuse of parking lots.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to them directly about their issues, but, they have a full parking
Yeah, they do.
office that goes around and tickets you, and I know, if you're
Right.
5 minutes past on your meter or in a lot, then you usually receive a ticket. And so, they've got the whole department that goes around and enforces all the different
Okay.
color permits and metered parking on the university.
So even with that, they still have problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you get into a more of an urban environment, and you have private parking lots and limited public parking, and you end up, having types of issues like this where you have to end up towing people that illegally park in parking lots and ticket them. So.
Great. Anybody else? Any other folks that would like to address commission during the public comment period? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Chuck, thanks again.
Thank you all very much.
The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a proposed update to the City of Moscow Comprehensive Plan. This is something that the Commission's been working on for the last couple of years. And before we open the public hearing, Mike is going to make a presentation on the proposed changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Before you tonight, we have kind of the culmination of the Commission's work over the last couple years for the 2019 Comprehensive Plan update, which started in about 2017 as far as updating our comprehensive plan. So just to begin, what the comprehensive plan is, long-range general planning document. It's required by Idaho state statute, the Local Land Use Planning Act, is where we get that, and required to address 16 topics: property rights, population, school facilities, transportation, economic development, land use, natural resources, hazardous areas, public services, facilities and utilities, transportation, recreation, special areas or sites, housing, community design, implementation. And I guess these two were added within the last few years: public airport facilities and agriculture. So looking at back in the past, 2009 was the last update, and it ended up being pretty much a rewrite of the 1999 comprehensive plan. So it really wasn't an update. We pretty much scrapped the 1999 plan and pretty much created an entirely new comprehensive plan through those years of work. An extensive public outreach participation program ended up being conducted at the time. There were neighborhood meetings, community-wide meetings, working groups. There was a large steering committee in the 20s that was formed. And then, of course, you had public hearings before Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council before they adopted the 2009 plan. So as we move forward, in order to be an effective and successful comprehensive plan must be more of a living, dynamic document. And that's because a lot of our decision makers and staff rely on the plan. And as far as their decisions, whether it be a subdivision or a rezone, legislative amendment, you usually refer back to the comprehensive plan. So it's important to have those periodic reviews and amendments to keep the plan current. So it points us to every 5 to 10 years we should take a look at reviewing, reevaluating, and maybe updating the plan with up-to-date information, methods, and maps, to take a look at reaffirming community values, and look at the objectives and implementation steps and cross off the ones that we've accomplished or create new ones, if whatever the case may be. So in 2017, so about 8 years since the original adoption of the 2009 plan, the Commission initiated the process of updating this plan. So went through and reviewed the entire plan, looking at community data, maps and objectives and implementation actions, and also consulted with other various city commissions like the Sustainable Environment Commission in order to update the sections of the plan that pertain to those particular commission's objectives. And then in October 24th of last year, the Commission conducted an open house meeting which coincided with the start of the 30-day public comment period, which ran until right before Thanksgiving on November 23rd, 2018. We did receive numerous comments during the open comment period, and we reviewed those during a commission meeting that was noticed and ended up incorporating a large amount of the comments that we did receive during the open comment period. So as we move forward, the Commission will conduct a public hearing and forward a recommendation to City Council, and then City Council will conduct their own public hearing and end up adopting the comprehensive plan. So going back a little bit as far as the plan organization, really 8 sections within the document before you today. We have the preface. It's kind of the introduction and purpose chapter, and we have chapter 1 describes the community context. Chapter 2 is dedicated to the community character and land use. This is where we have a lot of the future land use and current land use maps. Chapter 3 is dedicated to mobility. 4 is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space chapter. 5 contains public services, utilities, and growth capacity. Chapter 6 is economic development, and Chapter 7 is implementation. And then if you look through the document in Table P1, you know, all those requirements of state statutes are directed towards this matrix we have set up, and it lets you know where all those different topics show up within the plan. And so it's a good cross-reference just to make sure we're meeting all those state requirements. So it brings us to the preface. This is really just the introduction of the comp plan. So it goes through a little bit about the purpose of what planning seeks to achieve, the relationship to private property rights, description of plan development process, plan organization. Then we go to Chapter 1, which is the community context. Our overall goal of the plan, which has remained the same throughout the update, is to provide for sustainable incremental growth while preserving and enhancing the distinctive characteristics of Moscow and its rich, vibrant cultural, social, and physical environments. It also provides a summary of plan goals and objectives from all the rest of the other chapters. Gives a little bit about the local and regional context that Moscow is within. A little bit about historical and future growth projections. And then there's a natural resource section that's tucked into the very end of this chapter. So looking at what was updated as far as Chapter 1, so we went through and updated a lot of the community demographic information. So this was 2009 since the last update, and so we had the 2010 census as well as annual American community surveys that are put out every year. That we could update a lot of our demographic information within the document. So we had current population based upon all the previous census and American community survey numbers, go through population projections, as well as updated university enrollment for U of I and WSU. And then we had a large project to update the floodplain. So we had a lot of the updated floodplain information within the chapter. So that was the 2013 daylighting project that coincided with the University of Idaho Rec Center, Paradise Creek, and subsequently submitted a letter of map revision which remapped a lot of the area in the downtown to remove the floodplain from that corridor as well as Legacy Crossing. And the city contributed a number of dollars to that in order to extend it down to the south couplet in order to get it remapped and that floodplain removed from all those properties. So, of course, we updated our steep slopes and floodplain areas map. And so this is what we previously had. You can tell this area was the area that we talked about. And you can see that it's basically just contained to the channel itself within that area. And so that's the major change, the floodplain map that was affected by the 2013 letter of map revision that retracted the floodplain from that area. We ended up adding a new section, local response to changing global climate conditions. So this was largely the result of recommendations from the Sustainable Environment Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission worked through these over a number of months to incorporate this section into the plan. There were 7 local areas of concern: water, air quality, energy usage, transportation, infrastructure and environmental impacts, climate migration, and food security. Each section describes potential issues that could occur and gives recommendations to help mitigate some of those impacts. So that's really the larger new section that's within Chapter 1 of the plan. Brings us to Chapter 2, which is community character and land use. Goes through existing character of the city, housing, special areas and sites, the downtown area, community design, land uses. And the goals, like with Chapter 1, have not changed. There's, I think, 4 goals within this chapter. The first one's to direct land uses to meet current and future community desires and needs while conserving natural resources and protecting agricultural lands from scattered development through efficient and orderly development. Encourage a variety of housing types to meet the needs of residents of all ages and economic ability. Preserve and enhance special areas of the community to celebrate the community's identity, character, and heritage. And then to enrich the community's social, cultural, physical, and economic environments through the arts and integration of aesthetic infrastructure standards, and particularly through the placement of public art at key locations through the city. So updates within Chapter 2. Once again, we updated some demographic information, university and college enrollment in town, as well as elementary and secondary school enrollment. Housing unit inventory, updated that, as well as projected future housing demand based upon our projected population growth. Affordable housing, updated that section as well. Home occupations, I think there was a directive in the 2009 comprehensive plan to explore the inclusion of home occupations to allow kind of the live-work situation, and shortly after that was adopted in 2009, we ended up amending the code to allow home occupations in Type 1, Type 2 variations, which allowed those in pretty much all residential areas. So just updating that sections to reflect what had happened previously. Historic districts, we had a large expansion of the Fort Russell Historic District that the Historic Preservation Commission spent a lot of work on over a few years, and that was reflected in this document the new district boundary, as well as information about the district size and the number of contributing properties within the district. And then the urban renewal districts, we ended up closing out Alturas, and that was the amendment, the major amendment that occurred within the urban renewal district section of the comp plan. And then updating some landscaping is primarily associated with street trees in our street tree program. This was the existing land use character map. This is the new map. We had just gone through and as development occurred, just gone through and updated the various land use designations to meet whatever the new development was. And so there's quite a few changes on the east side of town, and there was some kind of microscopic level changes to different parcels in the downtown core that I think we missed maybe the first time in the 2009 comp plan map. So we had made those changes. Probably the largest or maybe most significant changes came to the community character and land use map. So you can see previously there's a large amount of gray shown on this map. That's what we talked about, the neighborhood conservation districts. And so that was the original intent of the 2009 comp plan, was to do neighborhood specific zones. And what we ended up doing over the years was just make it easier for existing development to kind of grow and expand in the existing locations. And so did a lot of code amendments as far as alternate front yard setbacks, how we measure setbacks, being able to average an entire city block in order to give you kind of an average of front yard setbacks in order to expand. Measuring from the back edge of the sidewalk instead of the property line on local neighborhood streets. We did a lot of these amendments, reducing setbacks in the front and in the side and the rear slightly in order to allow a larger footprint and more dense development. And so we ended up going that route and not really needing really not needing to go through neighborhood specific zoning districts. And so as such, we ended up going back through and eliminating neighborhood conservation as far as the designation, and reassigning those areas that were previously neighborhood conservation to new designations that we currently had. And then we have a couple of other designations that we ended up adding. We didn't have high density residential previously, so we ended up adding those. And we ended up tweaking some of the existing designations to, more accurately fit what we commonly see as far as zone changes. A lot of the issues surrounded the comprehensive plan land use designations, not really providing a whole lot of direction as to future zoning districts in the neighborhood conservation zone. So if the commission was faced with, I think we ran into this in Harvest Hills development, that it was neighborhood conservation, but it wasn't developed yet. And so we struggled with, protecting the existing neighborhood, but really the existing neighborhood wasn't developed at the time. And so that really, presented challenges to us as far as administering zoning or rezones to properties when we had that neighborhood conservation zone. And so we ended up going through and, like I mentioned, reassigning all those properties to other land use designations. And so that's the major changes that you see on the map there, as well as creating another designation for the university. So I think that was civic institutional for the university's property, and gone through and created a new designation for university. And that's what you see reflected on the map. So it brings us to Chapter 3, the mobility chapter. Currently go through regional and local context. It coincides with our thoroughfare plan, which designates local streets, collectors, arterials, national highways, as well as future roadway corridors in order to plan for those roadways as we expand. And corridor and gateway beautification, pedestrian mobility, bicycle mobility, multi-purpose pathways, transit and transit supportive development, school access and transportation. So looking at the goals, which have remained the same, to ensure the integration and coordination of the city's transportation systems with the regional facilities and modes of transportation, plan for the orderly development and continuity of the city's street and pathway systems, as well as connectivity to regional transportation needs to ensure the efficient delivery of services and navigation by residents and visitors. Third one, ensure that all transportation systems enable safe access and promote alternative mode use for all modes of mobility, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and public transit users of all ages and abilities. And to provide for continuity and function of the city's transportation system while ensuring context-sensitive design that preserves and enhances community character and quality of life. So updates as of this year. So once again, community information was updated. We had some bicycle commuter data that was updated after we got some new American Community Survey information on that topic. Updated vehicle collision data. We had the public art master plan that was created in the time between the 2009 update and this update. And so we just updated the public art section in order to reflect the adoption of the public art master plan and kind of the coordination of public art through the city. The street tree program was updated over the last few years, changed a little bit from vouchers that were awarded to homeowners to more of a program that the subdivision developer doesn't end up administering like previously. So now it ends up being a requirement of the certificate of occupancy for each home that the trees go in, and so that provides some flexibility with allowing the trees to go in. You know, anytime you have a vacant lot, you have a driveway, and it all depends on the home plan where that driveway is located. And so it didn't make sense to go in and put all the trees in as soon as the subdivision infrastructure was put in place. I wanted to shift that to allowing the trees to be put in prior to certificate of occupancy being issued on the house. And so that way you're not planting a tree and having to uproot it and put it in a different location when you know where the driveway is going to be located. And so a little bit of a change, and we just reflected that update in the section of the comp plan. Then we had map revisions, thoroughfare plan, which was discussed thoroughly at Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as Transportation Commission, and Les McDonald, Public Works Director, came a couple of times to talk through some of those issues and recommendations. We've got a map on accident-prone intersections, multi-purpose pathways, and transit routes in the city. So this was our thoroughfare plan. I think so this was the previous one. You'll notice that I think some changes that occurred were A Street being designated as a minor arterial, which was previously a collector street. So all the green lines represent collectors, and the blue lines represent minor arterials, and then the gray lines represent local streets. And then you can see the state highways in the gold color and the red color as well. So you can see the changes that occurred. There was D Street's always been designated as a minor arterial. So what happened between the last comp plan update and this update was the multimodal transportation plan occurred when Nelson Nygaard, the consultant, ended up creating and adopting that plan. They recommended that a few changes be made to the street network and the street classifications. And they worked through the Transportation Commission, and the Transportation Commission presented recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission in order to reclassify some of the streets. And so I talked about A Street changed, and so that was previously a collector, and now it's proposed to be a minor arterial. We had D Street, which remained the same. That was always a minor arterial. The two changes that are probably the most significant were 3rd Street being proposed to be a minor arterial, as well as 6th Street being a minor arterial. And, you know, that was largely the topic when Les came and gave the presentation to the commission, and you know, it was kind of a thorough discussion as far as just the context of minor arterials versus collectors, and then just running them through existing neighborhoods, and how it really, you know, the context of the street and the area really defines the speed limit and what traffic calming measures and things of that nature go into the roadway. And so I think at the end of the day, it was hard to draw a distinction between D Street and 3rd and 6th. And so being as though D Street has been designated as a minor arterial ever since the 60s and 70s, I think the commission thought that they wanted all those 3 streets to essentially be the same designation. And so that's why we have arrived at minor arterials for D, 3rd, and 6th. And then the other change that occurred was the ring road concept. So you can see previously we had the ring road, which ended up going all the way around the city. As part of that multimodal transportation plan, there was a cost-benefit analysis that was conducted that essentially stated that the only benefit as far as the cost would be the western alignments. So the detour from 95 to West 270 there into Washington, as well as from Washington into North Highway 95 as a way to bypass the city. So the major bypass that's needed is right here on Washington and 3rd, where you make the left-hand turn to go out on 8 with all the heavy truck traffic that ends up trying to negotiate that corner. And so that's the major concern as far as needing a highway alignment in order to bypass that. And so looking at the eastern quadrants, really the cost didn't exceeded the benefit that would be received as far as putting in those ring roads in the eastern side. So what the Transportation Commission had recommended was to designate existing roadways as a means to bypass the area, and so they proposed to use Palouse River Drive, end up coming all the way out here to Lenville, heading north, and then using the existing road network and some proposed, the dash lines or the proposed roadways, in order to link kind of those eastern quadrants. And the commission had reviewed that and decided that was the best way to proceed. These are the accident-prone intersections. So what we ended up doing was just, this was what was previously generated, just ended up using the multimodal transportation plans map and just inserting that within the comp plan. And that happened, I believe, on the transit routes as well. So we had the previous transit routes, which have changed slightly since 2009, and we just used the transit routes that were included as far as the multimodal transportation plan and dropped those in there. And then the multi-purpose pathways, and so these are Paradise Path and all the future parks and recreation pathways throughout the city. A lot of the ones, the dashed lines on your screen represent proposed paths as soon as development ends up occurring within those areas. So the major change between this map, I guess the 2009 comp plan map and the updated map, would be just to reflect the elimination of the ring road from the eastern quadrant. And so you can see, this dash line followed the ring road alignment in that eastern area, and so needed to shift that to follow those existing roadways. And so those are the major changes in that area, is just eliminating the pass from the ring road. So Chapter 4 brings us to Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Provides an introduction about the importance of parks in the city, and then goes through the parks classification system. So various, different distinctions between parks. We got pocket parks. A lot of these depends on the use and the size of the park. So pocket parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, linear parks and pathways, special use parks and facilities, regional parks, open space. And then there's also parks facility standards and park service area evaluation, which is the needs assessment. So our goal is to provide a system of well-distributed parks, open space, and recreational facilities that meet the active and leisure recreation needs of citizens of all ages, interests, and abilities. Updates to the Chapter 4 section. Once again, we updated some community demographic data, amended existing and future parks needs assessments with more up-to-date information there. And then added the parks that have since been added since 2009. So we had Baker Street Park, Lillian Woodworth Ottness Park, Indian Hills Park, Morgan's Orchard Park, the Edible Forest Park, which I think is in the process of going through a naming. I think it's going to end up being Harvest Park, Itani Park, and then there was also a name change at the end of last year of Eastgate Park, and that ended up being changed to Triangle Park, which everybody called it already. So, and we'll just kind of glance through the parks maps. So these have all been updated. We go through existing parks. The primary change was a shift a number of years ago. For some reason, we have bubble numbers that point to schools within the city. And so we went, and it was, you had a lot of this. I mean, it just looks cluttered just because of the annotation on the map with the names listed everywhere in the city. So, the whole city is just cluttered with names of parks. And so eliminated the schools symbols and then went to the entire parks list with reciprocating numbers, and so you can go and look where the parks are at the city. So that was the major update there. And then same with the Pocket Park service area. The Pocket Parks service area ended up being increased. So you'll see I think it went from 1/8 of a mile to 1/4 of a mile as far as the service area. So those are all the parks, and then the bubbles around those represent the 1/4 mile increment that the service area encompasses. And then once again, we've got the list of the parks here on the left-hand side. Neighborhood linear park service areas. So that became neighborhood park service areas. For a linear park, you really don't have a service area because you're using it to get from one place to the other. So I think that was just national parks ended up kind of eliminating service areas for linear parks. So we just have neighborhood parks, and I think that's about 1/2 mile is the neighborhood park service area. And then you can see those represented on the screen, as well as the list of parks on the left-hand side. And community park service area, I think that is about 1 mile. And we have 2 designated community parks, East City and Mountain View. And so those are the service areas in yellow. And we've, I think the only change here is just adding the parks list on the left-hand side. And then pathway system, we made a few updates for new paths. I think in Landy Lane, Peekaboo Estates, there was an extension of a path, kind of a multi-purpose path that ended up being added. But that was about the only thing that changed, I believe. And then the areas of need. And so, going through Chapter 4, based upon our total population and the amount of area we have dedicated to certain parks, there's formulas that are laid out in tables that determine what our parks needs are into the future. And we have areas of town that are in need of certain parks. And so obviously we have the community parks, and those are in the kind of the northeast quadrant of the city. So we're lacking in the southwest and the southeast areas as far as community parks. And then we have pocket parks. A lot of these circles that you see are parks that are actually undeveloped but have been dedicated as through a subdivision plat. And so as we get these parks developed, you'll start to see a lot of these areas of need start to be eliminated. Brings us to Chapter 5, which is Public Utilities, Services, and Growth Capacity. Goes through regional context with the aquifers mainly, potable water, sanitary sewer, stormwater conveyance and treatment, public safety, solid waste and recycling, capacity for growth. And we go through the goals to provide for sustainable growth while conserving natural resources, protecting natural features, and enhancing the character of the community and the region. provides for orderly and efficient delivery and location of public facilities, utilities, and services to the residents and businesses within the community. Advocate and practice the sustainable management and development of local and regional water resources and supplies to meet the needs of both current and future residents. And direct growth areas that can be most efficiently and economically served with public services and utilities while planning for future capacity needs. So what occurred with the 2019 updates, since that time we had the 2012 Comprehensive Water System Plan. And so this is just pretty much documents our existing water system and ends up being able to be put into a computer simulation for certain areas of town to make sure that we have enough capacity in those areas. And so really we didn't know a whole lot. You know, we had an idea of what we had previously, but this was like the main definitive document that went out and verified all of our pipes in the city as far as the water system and where the deficiencies were and where our capital improvements are needed in order to expand and update the system. And so mainly going through this comp plan document and updating this based upon the 2012 Comprehensive Water System Plan. And then we also had the 2011 Comprehensive Sewer System Plan, which essentially did the same thing for sanitary sewer within the city. And so a lot of the information that we had that we were unsure of, we had some sewer constraint areas that we had identified, which have since been removed. After we did the Comprehensive Sewer System Plan, after we identified that, you know, those areas that are above 75% of capacity, really the areas that need to be addressed, those areas below don't necessarily need to be addressed until they hit the 75%. And so those ended up being removed, I think, from our sanitary sewer constraint map, and as well as updating a lot more information within the plan. And then we have the creation of well number 10. So we have the number of wells in the city, and well number 10 is the newest well. It's not in production yet, but will be shortly. Well production information, so over the last few years we got updated well numbers, and then total water production as well was updated. Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee Water Action Plan, so the Palouse Basin PBAC committee ends up putting out a water action plan for the region, and they update this every so many years. Well, they had an updated action plan since the 2009 update, and so we've just gone through and updated their action plan within this document to reflect the most current action plan. And then we've done some things at the city as far as water conservation strategies. So we had lawn reduction, so if you put in Y-scaping and remove grass from your yard, you're able to get a rebate through the city, as well as a low-flow toilet rebate program. So just going through and reflecting what we've done the last few years. We've changed the name of the wastewater treatment plant. It's currently the Water Reclamation and Reuse Facility, so we needed to go back through and update a lot of the current language. And then going through and updating the improvements that have been made to the sanitary sewer system since 2009. Stormwater and public safety section, so our police section and fire section. We just went through and updated like personnel and some of those other things that were contained within those sections. So it was really just minor updates. And then solid waste and recycling has been updated. So since 2009, we ended up getting the single stream recycling program, which was implemented in 2016 and expanded in 2017 to include multifamily and commercial entities. And we also went through and updated the most recent changes to that program. Since China eliminated some of the recyclable exports that we're able to export to China, updated that section of the plan as well. So this is what I was referring to earlier as far as constraint areas. So this is stormwater, and our stormwater has remained the same. So these are essentially the same map that was in 2009. These are the areas. This is the Hog Creek culvert here. And then we have, I think, another storm line that goes to the creek there that's in need of updating. We've got a growth areas map that we ended up, so this was the 2009 version. You'll see some slight changes. Not sure, we had a large portion of downtown that was highlighted before, so we amended kind of those developed properties in the downtown core, and then amended other portions of the map that just slightly. So a lot of it's still the same from 2009. Potential sewer constraints, so you can see when we didn't know exactly, we needed to fill in some of the gaps as far as our storm or our sanitary sewer system. You can see all these areas are identified, all the way up and down Mountain View, White Avenue as being constraint areas for sanitary sewer. We updated this map based upon the comprehensive sewer system plan. And so you can see there's just a few of these areas now instead of all the way up and down Mountain View. And I think that was Blaine Street as well. And so now we just have segments along White Avenue there, a portion of Sweet Avenue, and then an area here where close to the kind of the Hog Creek culvert area. Chapter 6 is our economic development chapter. So we go through kind of the economic context of the city and the region, major employers and industries, economic indicators, community input, economic development strategies. And we go through the goals, which have remained the same: provide for sustainable economic growth and employment opportunities where existing and new businesses can thrive, while preserving and enhancing the character of the community. Enhance and strengthen the regional economy, utilizing the strengths and assets of the region, and to promote and enhance the arts and cultural resources as catalysts for economic development and tourism. So the major updates that we saw was just, so we had some of the major employers shift slightly, kind of went, ones went up, some went down. But largely they remain the same. It's just what position they were in 2009 has changed slightly. And then information regarding the type and number of employees has been updated for those major employers. And then we have employment and income has also been updated for the top 5 industries with more than 20 employees. University of Idaho, Washington State, we updated the student enrollment as far as employment numbers as well. And then cited some of the studies that reference the economic impacts of students on our region. And then sectors of the economy that have been updated with recent data. We've got the healthcare sector, manufacturing, agriculture, information, retail, tourism, and construction sectors, which has all been updated. And then our economic indicators also got updated, so labor force, unemployment, underemployment, and demographics. And then we've got some target industries that we're looking at actively promoting. Those have been updated as well. So looking at the arts, entertainment, recreation, that's one industry, and then professional, scientific, and technical services, followed by healthcare and social services, and then the last is tourism. So it brings us to the last chapter, the implementation section. Pretty much just lays out the responsibility for implementation of the plan, implementation methods, and the administration of the plan as well. And then future amendment process. So this gives us the 5 to 10 year timeline as far as updating the plan and how we should proceed in that manner. So evaluation and appraisal. And previously, I think the only change that we made to this section, there was an evaluation and appraisal report where staff was supposed to go through the document and look at everything that has changed and possible updates that needed to be made, put together a report, then come to the commission and decide how we wanted to proceed. And I think that what we propose to do is just eliminate the evaluation and appraisal report, instead skip that and go directly to the commission whenever it gets to that 5-10 year time frame, and then look at the things that need to be reviewed, and we can proceed accordingly. It would save time from putting the report together and just coordinate that with community development staff and the commission to proceed with an update in the future. So our next steps is to conduct a public hearing tonight, and then the commission is to prepare a recommendation to forward to City Council, and then City Council will end up conducting another public hearing and making the final decision as far as the adoption of the plan. So I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Any question for Mike before we open the public hearing? Nils?
I appreciate looking at this again. I feel like I've been, for 2 years, just plodding through the forest. And some days I wonder if and I looked at a lot of little trees, and I don't know if I looked at the forest. But a couple of questions that just came to my mind. On public utilities, is there something I missed in there about our digital access? I mean, we talk about utilities, but our ability to, are we comfortable that we've got the best broadband access? And did we mention that?
Well, I think the fiber comes into play with economic development, and so that's kind of the chapter that we see, our fiber optic network that shows up with. But I mean, as far as I know, we're fine with our
Well, I
network.
thought we were, but I just somehow, the word didn't show up. And then in the next chapter, the other question I had was in economic development, why did did I miss education, the word education on that page? In other words, we talked about all kinds of things like tourism, a little this. Well, I mean, the thing that we can all go home if we don't have the university. Basically, we're just in trouble. And so I was looking at that page trying to think, did I not see it? Did I?
Yeah, it's right
Oh,
there. So
there's University of Idaho and Washington State. Okay, so I must have just let that go by me as we got to the next page. Okay, those are the two things that it's refreshing to look at where we've been, because I've just been bumping into bushes and trees along in the last months as we look at each little detail. And that's the only things that came to my mind.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mike, thanks very much. With that, we will open the public hearing. The way I'd like to proceed is that we'll hear from anybody that has opposition or concerns about the proposals, any in support, and then finally just general comments. So if you wouldn't mind, we'd appreciate you limiting your comments to 3 minutes if possible. And with that, public hearing is now open. Goodness. Nils? Okay. Anybody else with comments of any nature?
Nils Peterson, 841 Travoy, Moscow. I'm here to say thank you and to commend the efforts of a number of individuals and commissions to add the new section relating to climate change. And from what I can read, there's been an enhancement of part of that even since the November draft. Is that right, Mike? It looked like there was a little bit of wording change. The thing that is important to me is that we recognize that the 20 by 20 effort was our climate action plan, and it's coming to an end by its name. And we need to launch into having a new climate action plan. And I think that the text is pointing in that direction. And what I hope is that the council, in the process of adopting this, begins charging commissions to take on the task of creating a new climate action plan for the city.
Thanks, Nils. And I think that certainly was the intention of the commission to put that issue front and center so that it would be considered. So, anybody else? Any other comments?
Yes, my name is Kathy Dawes, 1018 East E Street, and I echo what Nils just said about the climate change part. I'm very appreciative of that. But also, things kind of went through very quickly, and I did make some suggestions, and I don't know if they got incorporated or not, but I'm concerned about the homelessness problem in Moscow, and I couldn't remember where that would fit in on the plan and whether there's any way to address that in the plan. Is there?
Were you referring to like the mixture of housing types? Okay.
Yeah.
That was, we had that as pretty much a goal of Chapter 2, which is our community
Okay.
character and land use. And so to provide, a number of different housing types to allow for housing of a number of different types of pretty much individuals or
In need.
population. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other concern was the recycling. With this last major revision in recycling here in Moscow, it's caused a lot of problems. And I'm wondering if any of my suggestions got into the plan regarding that. So
Yeah, they did.
they did.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Super. Thank you very much. Anybody else? With that, I will close the public hearing, and commissioners, I guess proceeding now, it's our role to recommend or amend or otherwise change any of the proposed changes to the comp plan, and if we agree with the changes, then we will vote to approve and forward to City Council the recommended proposals. So any comments from anybody? Okay, well, with that, I would entertain a motion to forward our proposals to City Council of the recommendation that Council adopt the proposals as written.
I so move.
Nils is moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Victoria, second. All opposed, or all in favor, excuse me.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. We now have direction to move that to City Council. So, unless anybody else has any issues, I believe that was the last item on the agenda. So, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.